Hi, everyone. I'm trying this again, so hopefully you'll find me. I had to reboot everything on the live. So it is about 12:12 Pacific time. And I'm just trying to get the live to work. I'm hoping you'll find it. I don't know if I should go into the community page. Hopefully. All right, I'm seeing some people join, so maybe I'll get it to work this time. Sorry, guys. Mercury is in the spot where it's difficult on my chart. So, yeah. So hopefully this will work. Please make a note in the chat where you're coming in from, because I'm going to take a few minutes to get started here. I might have to jump. I don't know if I can jump over to another page while I'm doing this and go into the YouTube studio and make a comment on the community page, but I will do that. So where are you coming from? And I also want to know how much you know astrology, like if you're a very beginner or if you have some astrology classes under your belt. That would be good to know, because this is going to focus a lot just on the planetary transits of 2025. And I'm going to break this up into two parts. So I'm going to focus on the first part of the year in this particular live and the charts that I've prepared. And I'll also just kind of give an overview, like as a list of like things that are important to pay attention to in 2025. 2025 is going to be quite an extraordinary year, and it's going to be a lot of change for people because of so many outer planets either have switched signs, like Pluto into Aquarius, but also two more. So kind of all the other outer planets are kind of getting a change up. And so we have Uranus changing signs, and we also have Neptune changing signs. And then we also have Saturn changing a sign, and also Jupiter. So really dynamic. And we also have the lunar nodes changing signs. So there's a lot going on this year. So I wanted to kind of point these things out through a 2025 looking ahead kind of detail. So I'm going to try to put this on the community tab just for everybody. Hold on one second. Let's see where I should put this. Hold on one second, please. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to post this for everybody. All right. So I don't see anybody adding anything to the chat yet. So is the volume okay for you all? Because I'm not using my normal microphone. And I'm doing that just to kind of save maybe on the memory for what it's having to produce so it can work. So hopefully the sound is working for everybody. So, okay, thank you, Tamasha, for telling me it's working. So there's only a few in here right now, but hopefully others will come and join. But so I'm going to share my screen here in just a minute and get going on the slides. But I wanted to kind of share kind of a little bit about why there's going to be so much change in 2025. And at the very end of this live, I will share a little bit about some of our favorite actors. And I know a lot of you came to my channel through the Bridgerton a series that I did on season 3 in the astrology for Nicola and Luke from the promo tour. So I'll do a little bit of astrology for those who are attending. That will be at the very end, just in looking at their charts and kind of thinking about the beginning of the year, what might be some important transits that will be important for them. So you can kind of keep an eye on your favorite actors, of course. for Bridgerton. Okay, so let me share my screen when I get over here, and share screen. I'm going to do this right now. Actually, I need to get rid of this. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to make that bigger for you all. View slideshow. Hold on one second, please. There we go. Can you guys see that okay? Hi, Little Red in DC. Well, you'll like the charts because I made most of the charts in DC. Okay, so hopefully this is working okay. I'm going to see if I can get the slideshow to work from the beginning. Can you still see me? I don't know. Okay. Well, when I do that, that pulls it away from. I can't see myself, and I don't know if that's going to be recorded into live when I do that. So I'm just going to do it this way. So, okay, so we're going to jump in, and I have this little detail of what I think 2025 will be like. It'll be like a roller coaster ride. And at any given point in time, any one of us could go through all those emotions of being on the roller coaster ride in 2025. Oh, thank you, Tamasha. That's good to know. So hopefully we're back. Can you see me now? I think I need to leave it in this kind of setting where it's got my main charts and plus all the other charts on the side there. I can't share a full slideshow from PowerPoint, so I have to do it this way. I think maybe if I went live out of Zoom, it might like split the screen or something better, but it is what it is for now. So hopefully you guys can see the screen of the gals on the roller coaster. I thought it was going to be a great theme for 2025 because it will feel like we were all of us at different points in time because of how the display of planetary transits are going to be in 2025 are going to be very exciting at sometimes. Sometimes it'll be like, gripping the edge to hold on. It'll be a lot of changes, and some changes are exciting and full of adventure, and some are the ending of something that's been going on for a while, and then it's making space for the new that's coming in. And usually humans don't like big change. So, but that's what 2025 is all about, is a lot of change. And so, yeah, big year. So it might be, I always recommend when I'm giving people readings to try to keep some kind of written journal. And the reason I think, even if it's once a week, it helps kind of set aside space to kind of document for yourself what's going on within a week, within a month, things that have been forward in your mind, because it's good to kind of, I think 2025, because of all the changes that will be going on, you'll want to have points of reflection because there'll be so much dynamic. It'll be like some ending chapter. So when one chapter ends, another begins, and you want to have, insight into that to go back on later in the future, because 2026 will be when things actually start setting more, and then really accelerating in 2026. Okay, and I'll tell you why. So 2025 has a lot of perhaps some ending notes because of the certain planetary transits of what they're doing, but also because of the cycle. Because we look at, as astrologers, we look at the cycles of everything, like how things are moving in comparison to another planet. So two planets and the relationship by phase. Everyone knows about the moon and how we have a new moon and then it moves into crescent, and then the first quarter, and then gibbous, and then we get to a full moon, right? And then it starts waning from that after the full moon, right? And then we come back down. Is a waning gibbous, a waning, third quarter moon, and then the waning crescent, and then back to the new moon. And every planet with another planet has that same kind of phasing. So it's important to understand phasing, okay? And I will be introducing just a real simple basic for the very beginners about astrology for the moon, so people can kind of understand these phases. Okay, that will be coming soon because I want to start giving the very beginners something to kind of absorb in little bites of astrology. So that will be coming soon. Okay, so moving forward, let's go into just the lunar cycles of 2025. These are kind of the basics. I kind of think of the lunar cycles. I focus my consciousness into the lunar cycles, even though a lot, we pay attention a lot just in our society to when the sun enters a sign, and people celebrate their birthdays around, the month that the sun is, in their sign, and that's how we kind of like look at astrology is what's your sun sign. That's kind of the first. But the lunar cycles give us the rhythm underneath it all of what is like really like the importance of the moon for us. And the moon is like our soul. So it's really important to pay attention to the moon. So in 2025, I've got two slides here for just the new moon cycle to the full moon, and then I also include the eclipses in here. So you can see that we have the new moon in Capricorn coming up in just today's the 28th, so that's happening on the 30th, depending on where you are in the world, of course. And so it's going to be at 9 Capricorn on December 30th. And then that's about 5:27 p.m. That I believe that's the full moon. No, that's the full moon in Cancer. The full moon in Cancer on January 13th is going to be at 5:27. I need my other little bookie here. So for my reference point, the reference point for the new moon on the 30th is, well, that's kind of interesting. Ends at the same. Okay, so the new moon at 9 Capricorn 44 minutes on December 30th is at 5:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can calculate from Eastern Standard Time, back 3 hours for the Pacific time, and then forward so many hours for London. I believe it's like an 8-hour difference between my time zone and London. Anyway, I think it's kind of helpful to kind of consider when we have the full moon in each month, right? Because the full moon is kind of like as things get illuminated. The new moon is kind of as things are pulling something from the past cycle and bringing it into the next lunar cycle, right? But it has its own kind of seed of potential of what it's going to do. So as you sit, I like to write my newsletters at the new moon. I do some full moons. I don't do all blogs on the full moon, but a lot of astrologers like to do it on the full moon too, as well. But I kind of make sure that I'm always doing the new moon as a part of the beginning of a cycle, and I kind of speak to the whole month ahead kind of thing. But that's, the full moon in Cancer on January 13th, the new moon in Aquarius, January 29th. This is something that you can stop when you rewatch it and take a snapshot of this if you like, and then I'll write I encourage people, if they don't have these noted on their calendar that you could actually put, you know, a dark circle on your calendar for the new moon and just a simple circle for the full moon, and put these on your calendar and kind of note the sign and degree that moon is in, because that will help you kind of consider you know, part of your life and what might come to life during that period of time. It's always helpful kind of paying attention. I always encourage people to see how astrology is opening up in the life, and then where it takes you in terms of your curiosity of like, oh, that's interesting. This is happening near a full moon, or this is happening near a new moon. So I do encourage that as you begin learning astrology. And if you are someone who already does that, fantastic. You're actually paying attention to the feminine side when you pay attention to the lunar cycle. Okay. Then we have the new moon in Pisces in February. The first eclipse comes at the full moon in Virgo, the lunar eclipse on March 13th. If you're, I think that's, you know, late in the evening, the 13th, but it's early in the morning, like just after, you know, a couple hours after midnight, March 14th on the East Coast of the US. And that's a full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. And then the new moon in Aries has a solar eclipse at 9 degrees of Aries. So if you have a 9 degrees Aries, or about, you know, I definitely within 3 degrees either side of that eclipse, you're going to be feeling that in some dynamic, very dynamic way. Aries tends to be a very strong, and so when the solar eclipse is in Aries, it's really life changing in a lot of ways. So I always really have people pay attention to the eclipses, okay? Of course, I will do astrology details on this, and I like to do lives as we get closer to those specific events within a week or two of that, so we can have that in the live and be discussing it a little bit more real time. Because there'll be events that happen before that that will definitely start marking that as part of that eclipse cycle, okay? And then we have the full moon in Libra, April 12th. What I would encourage you guys to do is kind of look at your charts. If you don't have your charts, you can always contact me through my website contact page or on the community page, and I can help you create a astrology chart for yourself. You'll need your birth time. But we also have the new moon in Taurus will be April 27th, and the full moon will be in Scorpio May 12th. So you can see the rest of these here. New moon in Gemini May 26th, full moon in Sagittarius June 11th, and new moon in Cancer June 25th, full moon in Capricorn July 10th. I'm going to go ahead and share the other slide, even though it kind of goes into the second half of the year, and I'll be doing a part 2 on the second half of the year, but I'm going to do all of the lunar cycles so you can see them. So the new moon in Leo is on July 24th, and the full moon in Aquarius is August 9th. And then we have new moon in Virgo, August 23rd. And then the full moon Pisces lunar eclipse, that's at 15 Pisces. This is a very important one for me. That's September 7th. That's right on my notes, so that's going to be interesting. And then the new moon Virgo solar eclipse is September 21st. That's at 29 degrees of Virgo. So that'll be a very interesting one, because it's a 29 Anuretic degree. That's a critical degree when anything's at 29 degrees. So that solar eclipse on September 21st will be interesting. And then the full moon in Aries, October 6th at 14 Aries. And then we have new moon in Libra, October 21st at 28 Libra. And then full moon in Taurus, November 5th at 13 Taurus. New moon Scorpio, November 20th. Full moon in Gemini, December 4th, and new moon in Sagittarius on December 19th, which is the day after my birthday, at the end of the year at 28 Sagittarius. And then the full moon in Cancer, that will be just a couple of days after the new year in January 26th. And of course, I'll do another full-on, 2026 astrology later. Any of those, I'm curious, anybody who's attending, are any of those dates jumping out at you? And if anyone here has like in terms of the eclipse cycles, because I think the eclipses will be very interesting for folks. Um, and if you have anything with, like an angle of the sun, moon, these kinds of things, or a planet near those degrees, I'm wondering if you are catching some of that while you're watching. But maybe you're just learning, you haven't looked at that yet. Let me know if you are learning and you're looking into that now. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go into is just a little bit more insight on the eclipses. Here's a quick screenshot for those interested in paying attention to the eclipses. And of course, the lunar nodes, the true node, there's like we calculate like true node, and that is a lot of astrologers go by the true node. Some go by the mean node. Stephen Forrest goes by the mean node. So that's January 29th when the mean node kind of moves into making the shift into Pisces out of Aries. So it'll be Pisces as the north node and Virgo as the south node. And so this is going to be where the eclipses are. But because Pisces and Aries, we have such a close, it's interesting that we have so much going on between water, fire, and back to water with some planetary change-ups this year. So it's interesting how that mix-up is happening. And I'll discuss that in just a minute with some of the big planets. So the eclipses that I want you guys to pay attention to are the lunar eclipse, and that's happening on March 13th or 14th, depending on where you are on the map. And you want to consider, like Pacific time, it's 11:55 p.m., but if you're on the East Coast, it's 2:55 a.m. But I always remind people that the eclipses tend to be really, really active, like especially 3 days before the eclipse and 3 days after. But I would stretch that out that it's really active within 2 weeks, 3 to, like 2 to 3 weeks before and 2 to 3 weeks after is really the hot period of time where things are really manifesting relative to what's getting eclipsed or what's getting activated in someone's chart. I also like to help people through that dynamic when you get a personal reading. So because the eclipses tend to activate a lot of things, and oftentimes I get a lot of activity around the eclipses. So I encourage people, if you know that there's something sensitive in your chart around 23 degrees, 24, 25, 26, or even I would go from like 20 degrees of Virgo clear to the end of Virgo. Those are going to be the very sensitive degrees, but the exact lunar eclipse is on 23 Virgo. But then you can also go to the opposite side of the chart into Pisces and have the same kind of because that's where the sun will be to make the lunar eclipse. And then the earth comes in between, right? That's the eclipsing thing. March 29th is a really significant day. Because we have a solar eclipse at 9 Aries. And when the sun is in Aries, it's very, very powerful. It is the exalted sign for the sun. So it tends to have a lot of activity around that. And when it gets eclipsed, it kind of has that really a lot of significant things changing within a dynamic and happening very quickly. So we will see that, and with it being in Aries, there'll be a lot of activity around conflict and these kinds of things that can get activated or that lose their power and lose their energy around it. Okay, so it kind of it can activate people in a strong way in conflict, but also there's a kind of a loss of power because the sun is getting eclipsed. Okay. And that's on March 29th, but there's some other planetary things happening on March 29th that makes that even more a dynamic days. And I would almost like circle and highlight March 29th and the days preceding and days after, right? Especially days preceding an eclipse, okay? That's a really key time of the year. And that's right after the spring equinox on March 20th, which I have a chart for. And there's so much activity in that last part of March. And then September 7th, there is the lunar eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces. And this is at 11:09 a.m. On the Pacific Daylight Time. and then 2:09 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's September 7th, and that one is right on my lunar node. So that's going to be an interesting period of time for me, which I already know some things that are happening on that in that month for me, but I'll bring out that surprise later. What else? And let's see here. Oh, hi, Tamasha. You saw that there's a date in March where a lot of planets align. Yes, there's several. A lot of things going on. I don't know about lining up. So that might be, that's what you're talking about is declination. And I have not looked at the declination explicitly, but there's a lot of activity of things from the solar eclipse to a major planet ingress into Aries and these kinds of things very close to that date. Okay. And I think also Mercury is very active that day. On September 21st, we have the solar eclipse at 29 Virgo, which means that like 29 to Virgo, but I would go a few degrees off to earlier in the sign, but also into Libra. So that's Virgo. Yeah, it's a Virgo to Libra. So the first few degrees of Libra will also get highly activated. Okay, and I'll tell you why. As I get to some of those charts, and you'll be able to visualize it better, okay? So the September 21st, that solar eclipse is at 12:54 p.m. Pacific time and 3:54 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, for those who are interested in the timings of that. I encourage people that are beginning astrology to get a calendar that you can write in. I get this one every year. It's from Llewellyn's. I just love it. It's a pocket one. It's kind of a pocket one if you have a bigger purse. But what I love about it is it gives all these cycles, and you can then write in on the day some things if you want. It's really nice. So if you wanted to just keep a real kind of couple sentences on a day about some things that are happening for you, it's an easy way to have a record of going back on things, because when you start studying astrology, you absolutely, hi Camilla, you absolutely want to have a record of things, because as you learn astrology, you will be pulling these back out, say you're just starting astrology this year and you want to remember what was going on in 25. There's so many things going on in 25. And if you kept a record, you'll have something to go back to. Now, if you prefer to do it digitally, keep a little, Google Doc and, type the date in, have it by the year so you can go back to it. And you just kind of want to make notes of certain things that are happening. Like big events are very important for exploring and understanding your life experiences as you do a deep dive into your astrology, as you learn it. And I encourage that, of course. And I'm going to be having classes over 2025 as I continue to build on this with others, because we have interested folks who want to do that. But it's kind of important to keep a record, even if it's once a week or even once a month or twice a month, enough to have a little bit of like this, relationships, beginnings and endings, changes. Even if your best friend is having some changes, writing down what your best friend is doing, what your family is doing. These are very, if you move, these are important. Or if you have to have surgery, these are all really key things for, individuals as they go through them, or they get married or they separate. All these kind of life events are important to have, and especially our children being born. These are important. Okay. So I encourage that a lot. So that's the detail of the eclipses that I want to bring to your attention. Let's go into the retrogrades really quickly. And you can, of course, come back to this and snapshot it as you wish. We have Mercury. It's stationed direct December 15th of this month. I'm recording this on December 28th of 2024. And that was at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. And then it's stationed... let's see here, it stations retrograde March 14th if you're in the Pacific time zone, March 15th if you're in Eastern time zone and beyond. And it's going to be at 9 degrees of Aries. So remember, 9 degrees is going to be a hot degree in 2025 because we have more than one thing going on. So March 14th, 15th, Mercury is stationing there. So it really activates that degree. And then the sun, that's the solar eclipse of the sun on March 29th. So just like within that cycle, right? So the sun lands on it. So anyone with 9 degrees or, a few, like 3 degrees off. So 9 plus 3 is like 12 degrees. These are the tight, like orbs for calculating things. And then 6 degrees is also very hot of Aries. These degrees of Aries are super hot. But I would also say take that to the opposition, which is Libra. So same thing, you're going to have 9 degrees of Libra and plus or minus on that a little bit. You're going to have a lot of activity, things going on, events happening, because Aries is a cardinal sign. And so things happen really fast and really dynamic around, in the cardinal sign. And then, of course, Capricorn and Cancer are on the square of that. So anybody who has 9 plus 3 degrees, plus or minus 3 degrees off of 9 degrees of Capricorn or Cancer will have that experience at a square. So it will present a challenge. A challenge is like that's the square. So hopefully you kind of keep these things in mind and make note. And I would say that March period of time is super changeable, lots going on. And a really big planet is about to ingress into Aries as well. And I'll have that in just a minute. This is more of the retrogrades, but that's a very important month. Then we have July 17th, 18th, again, Pacific time and Eastern time and beyond for what day that is for you. But it's July 17th, 18th. That Mercury retrograde is at 15 degrees Leo, 35 minutes. And I forgot to mention at the March one, it will station direct in April 7th, around 26th Pisces. So that first Mercury retrograde goes from fire to water, which is really significant. It will have a lot of external energy, and then it goes emotional. And it gets, when Mercury goes into Pisces, things get confusing, foggy, and, what's the truth here? What is really going on? That's what will spill over in that cycle. Then the one in July, Leo. So here it again, the Mercury is in retrograde, starting to retrograde in a fire sign, this time in Leo. It's 15 Leo, and then it'll retrograde back all the way to 4 degrees of Leo. And that's all in fire, that second one. And that when it stations to go direct at the 4 degrees of Leo, it will be opposing Pluto. So that Mercury will be really lit up. Okay. So that period of time, August 11th, around that week will be very, very active. A lot of ego expression coming out, the shadow side a little bit, so you watch for that. And then there will be causing a kind of, when it comes to station direct, it will amplify that tension between the power and, like really loud bravado coming out from people in positions of power and those kinds of things. Okay. And then that's in July and August, right? That whole cycle. And then the Mercury retrograde in November, on November 9th, it's going to be another fire sign, this time in Sagittarius. And that's at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. And then goes all the way till November 29th when it stations direct at 20 Scorpio. So this time it'll go Sagittarius fire to the water of Scorpio. So we have this kind of intensive, like very outward philosophical teaching, maybe direct communicator, maybe putting their foot in their mouth kind of thing. That's Sag. And then Scorpio will be the emotional kind of undercurrent, like intensity or probing mind of Scorpio. And that is what we will see in that last period of time of the Mercury retrograde at the end of the year. Okay. Venus also has a retrograde cycle this year. Venus will retrograde March 1st in Aries. And look, that's at 10 degrees of Aries, 50 minutes. So again, that 9-10, another hot spot. See how hot that degree is this year? And that will go retrograde and go into Pisces. So fire to water, outward expression to the inner, the emotional. So very much expressed out, courage, or handling conflict, and then backward, pulling back, allowing, or listening, or trying to quiet the mind. You know, when Venus goes into Pisces, she's exalted. Great time to do art and music and all those things. You're looking for that calm and peace, and when Venus is in the Pisces, it can bring that, right? So there's kind of that tempo with Venus, and stations direct on April 12th, okay, in Pisces. Then we have a Mars, the Mars retrograde started in December. So we have a lot. See how many retrogrades that we have going on? And then Mars stationed at 6th Leo. So the early degrees of Leo, again, very dynamic. And that Mars was opposite Pluto when it's stationing. And then it is backing up into Cancer. That will take until February 23rd when it stations direct at 17 Cancer. Again, we have the fire Leo back into water of Cancer. See the fire to the water and then back into the fire. So it's kind of an interesting mix to see these retrograde cycles having this. Then Jupiter will station retrograde. Well, it stationed retrograde on October 9th. So that was a couple months ago. And then that was at 21 degrees of Gemini. And then it's stationing direct on February 4th in our new year of 2025. And that will station direct at 11 Gemini. And then on November 11th, later in the year of 2025, we have a stationing Jupiter. It'll station retrograde at 25 Cancer, and then it will station direct March 10th in 2026 at 15 Cancer. So it kind of holds, the Jupiter will hold within the air sign retrograde, and then which we are in right now, and then in the end of the year, it'll be in water. Okay, and Jupiter in Cancer, by the way, is exalted in your traditional astrology. And then the last one I want to bring out is Saturn of these planets. I do have the outer planets here in just a minute. Stationing retrograde July 12th or 13th, depending on where you're on the map, in 2025 at 1 degrees of Aries, 56 minutes, so almost 2 degrees. And then it will station direct November 27th, 2025 at 25 degrees Pisces, 9 minutes. And so that will be, we have the tip over the ingress of Saturn into Aries along with Neptune, but they will spend a lot of the year still in Pisces, kind of finishing up that cycle. Okay, so we have, again, the Saturn will ingress in, and we'll have the ingress here in just a minute. But that ingress is into fire, the Aries, which is going to start they're actually going to have a conjunction with Neptune in 2026, but they're dancing back and forth over Aries and Pisces in 2025. So it does a lot of change up, okay? So that's those planets out to Saturn. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And then let's take a look at the outer planets and their cycles for 2025 and their retrograde. So one of the biggest events of 2025 is Uranus will go into Gemini, right? And that's July 7th, and it makes its first ingress into Gemini. I will do a lot more deep dive on that because that's such a significant event. I just want to do a little bit of overview here at the beginning. So it will Uranus stations retrograde on September 1st of this year, 2024, at 27 degrees of Taurus, 15 minutes. But it stations direct on January 30th of 2025 at 23 degrees Taurus, 16 minutes. And so that's kind of like the finishing process of Taurus there, of Uranus, right? And then it will do the ingress into Gemini in July. And then in September of 2025, on the 5th and the 6th, depending where you are on the map, it will station to go retrograde 1 degree of Gemini, 28 minutes, and then it will go back into Taurus for one final, what I call the one final sweep, one final, let me shake it up and make it rock and roll again in the Taurus sign, and it will do that in 2025. And then stations direct February 3rd, 2026. So you can see how, like, even in early 2026, we have a little bit of shakeup of Uranus still happening, right? And then it finally re-enters the Gemini April 25th of 2026. So you can see, like, the first quarter of 2026 will have Uranus in Taurus, even though the ingress in Gemini came in 2025. Okay, so again, rock and roll, because Uranus makes us have moments of chaos. It is the liberator. It's liberating things that seem fixed and true, like we think they're constant and solid. And Uranus comes in and go breaking that up. That's what it's to do. That's its purpose. It's to break up the things that have been fixed in its nature and to get ready for the new, right? And then Neptune, we're looking at the it will be in Aries. It makes the ingress, and I'll go into the Neptune ingress into Aries that's happening at the end of March. But it will station retrograde July 4th of 2025 at 2 degrees 11 minutes of Aries. So the early degrees of Aries are very hot in 2025, and then it will back up through its retrograde back into Pisces. And that'll be on October 22nd of 25. So October 22nd, 2025 to January 26th of 26, that's when Neptune is back in Pisces after having gone into Aries. So you can see it. And when you have an outer planet like Neptune making those change-ups, massive, massive things change. Okay. And it's lining up with Saturn to make a conjunction on February 22nd or 23rd, right there, of 2026 for it's a new synodic cycle for those two planets. And those are two major planets. So those are major things going on in the whole world. And so whatever countries have early signs or late signs of Pisces and like the first couple of degrees of Aries or even Libra, right? And so we have that 29 Pisces, but also remember 29 Virgo has something significant with the solar eclipse at September 21. There are so many major events happening in 2025. Okay, and as we get into those months and closer to those particular dates and transits, we'll have a deeper dive. Okay, but I will share some of those charts today. And then, of course, Pluto, now it's in Aquarius. It's going to stay in Aquarius for 20 years. Pluto in Aquarius is, really Pluto is the thing that will take things down to the very core. It basically, the whole purpose is transformation down to the core, burns it down to the ground kind of almost, and then it rises out of the ashes for what is going to be moving forward. Okay, so we had quite an experience of Pluto in Capricorn, of what became aware for us about our systems, our infrastructure, and power in those the positions, and even classism, which is very much right in front of our faces right now. And if you think about the United States of America, other countries, maybe even France, have an interesting period of time, and even the UK, because of Pluto at the end of degrees of Capricorn. It's like when the birth of capitalism happened, and having that be going through a cycle of transformation. It's really on a lot of people's minds about how we go forward. And countries like, I would say around the globe, there's different kinds of events that happen in every country. But from my own country, we've gone through the Pluto return, but we're still in what I call the rebuilding part of what could, because we're experiencing that Pluto return through like very important beginnings of the United States of America, such as our Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, and these kinds of things that were created after that, right? So those first I don't know, 15 or so years after the Pluto, that Pluto position. So we're going to have repeating themes. So what we believe in, what we think about, and what we believe in as a nation is up for us to either fight for it again or shake off a king-like person. And that's going to be interesting to see, observe, and watch in the United States what we have coming into office in January of 2025. So will we have that same thing? So a lot of people are concerned about the potentials for increasing conflict, and absolutely, there are definitely a lot of potentials for that because of so many changes going on and who will be in power and how that will. But I'm really curious what the people do. And so one of the things that you want to pay attention to, or if you can get additional insights, I will do some of this on an Aries ingress chart. When the sun goes into Aries at the spring equinox, you get additional information about what is the theme for wherever you take the chart for that vernal equinox moment, because that's kind of the start of the new year, right, from an astrology standpoint. And that will give you telltale information about how it will go. And I think there's one that I follow all the time. His name is Wade Caves. He's an excellent astrologer. He does the mundane astrology, and he may have a webinar on the Aries ingress, and I always join his because I love his work so much. And you may find others, but definitely those are great. Mundane astrology is a whole. It's some of what a little bit. I do a little tiny bit of mundane, but mostly what I do is I care about the individual souls. So, but I can give you an overview, right? Anyway, Pluto, when it goes retrograde, it stations retrograde on May 4th. And that's at 3 degrees of Aquarius, 49 minutes, and then it'll station direct on October 13th. I put 2015. That's actually 2025. Sorry about that. I just noticed my typo. At 1 degrees of Aquarius and 22 minutes. And because a lot of you are fans of Nicola and Luke, and I'm going to add a little note here, that Pluto retrograde cycle, when it goes stations direct, will really amplify their charts, okay? Because I still believe that their ascendant and the opposition of that is their charts of their ascendants. Like Nicola's ascendant's very likely to be in the first 2 degrees, 3 degrees. I still think she's like 1 or 2 degrees of Aquarius. And so I think that the stationing direct in October will be very interesting for her. And another shift in her career and what's highlighted about her in the world. And then Luke, same. So we'll see some of that. Okay. I know you guys like to learn about those guys a lot. Which I'll have a little bit more at the end as well, but I wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's get into major planetary transits and the ingresses. So here's the biggies and that we want to pay attention to: the Neptune ingress into Aries, the Saturn entering into Aries. And in 2025, they are in what I call balsamic phase. That's a term, that's an astrology term, I guess. It's kind of like they haven't quite met up to be in the conjunction, and the conjunction is in 2026 in February. So what happens in balsamic phase is like when the moon is in balsamic phase with the sun. It's at the end of the cycle, things are kind of wrapping up. What happens at the end of a cycle is things in that last few months will really rapidly manifest for the old cycle. Okay. And so as it gets closer and closer to February 2026, we will see really amplification of Neptune and Saturn, whatever they rule, whatever they are responsible for in anyone's given chart, or any city, state, nation, whatever, where that lands in their particular charts will be super activated to manifest events and so forth. And Saturn, of course, tends to be really interesting in Pisces, and with Neptune, it's been quite fluid and lots of water, so probably more flooding issues. But when when it goes into Aries, Saturn, from a traditional standpoint, is in its fall, so it's not as strong. But so I kind of wonder about how people experience that. I think it depends on how much fire you have in your chart versus how much water you have in your chart, and what other planets and angles are at that late degrees of Pisces and early degrees of Aries, because that's going to be really an interesting time to understand something larger going in. It's at the combination is almost like you have to surrender to a degree, because Neptune, the whole thing of Neptune is about surrender, or understanding that something else is coming in. And but Neptune is a part of, like, what I think is a part of the unconscious mind of the whole collective, right? But there's a surrendering that's going on. People can get swept up in events, and I think that's important as a theme to kind of keep in mind and kind of pay attention. But I kind of wonder about the power of the creativity when the Neptune is finishing off the Pisces is off the charts. So idealism, romantic things, like you like a romantic things, I think, really increases. But when it goes into Aries, it really switches. Okay, it switches into, it's almost like fire on the mind. It's more of like it's almost like fire. Neptune is like there's a surrendering to some other thing that's going on in the consciousness that's fire. And when you think of it, of fire, it's like a new beginning. Something new is trying to emerge. Something is new showing up in our world that we are like, whoa, what is that? But then we're questioning it, because when it goes back into Pisces, they're like, what's that? What's that? What's that? And I think there's 2 or 3 things already appearing for us now that have been in the news or been on social media, and we're kind of go, what the heck is going on there? Is related to is it UAPs out of a lot of stuff going out of New Jersey, but these have been around. The sightings have been around other places like Arizona, California, Carolinas, Florida. There's been other sightings, pilots. So I think there's going to be an interesting experience of humans and understanding there might be something dimensionally different coming forward. Okay, does that make sense what I'm saying, guys? This is so major, because a lot of people think it is more of a belief thing, and so they will struggle with it. There'll be cognitive dissonance with something. But if you already like, yeah, that doesn't, especially if you have an Aquarian kind of consciousness that's maybe a little bit more forward future thinking, and also explores topics that's not of the norm, this will be like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I would expect that. It's Pluto and Aquarius. We're going to see something completely different when it comes to that kind of thing. So people who have interested in UFOs, it's like their heyday, right? Okay, so there's that. And then the second is, and I'm not saying what it is or not, because this is a conversation that's been had around my house, and we're like different points of view. So, but I'm very curious about what's going on and what really is happening there. And it's interesting about what's not been communicated. And I think that's kind of a bit telltale, but we'll go into that later. Another thing that's important to take into consideration in 2025 is where artificial intelligence is going to take us. So Pluto entered into Aquarius in March of 2023, and then it had its finishing retrograde cycle in 2024 around Capricorn, and fully then November. And what's interesting about all those UAP things, those sightings started right when Pluto was going back into Aquarius, right? And really coming online in a big way. So that's kind of interesting, right? Like a timing perspective. And then the other thing is the artificial intelligence. So AI, when Pluto first made the entry into Aquarius, AI went bonkers when they first turned it on. And then remember that them turning it off and then taking it back. But then there's been a lot. I mean, I follow some of this because I've lived in the tech world for a lot of my career. So artificial intelligence now has Gemini, where you can talk freely with the Gemini, like almost real time, and kind of a back and forth conversation. And it's kind of interesting where it's going, and it'll be interesting to see how we adjust to that or how we adapt collectively, because I think it's impacting how jobs are. There are other things that are impacting that, but that's definitely in there. We don't even know, I think, how that will impact how we work, right? You're going to have to use the artificial intelligence to be maybe competitive. So the adapting will be that humans who know how to use the artificial intelligence correctly or in a way that is meaningful to whatever the task is at hand. And so the best tools, because everything, we create that thing because of tools, right? To make it faster, whatever. But the thing is what's the consequence of making that, right? We don't understand the consequence of making that because we are novices. We are from that technical perspective. So that's still unknown, right? But by the end of Pluto in Aquarius, 20 years from now, I'll be in my mid 70s at that point. I'll be a little old lady with gray hair. That will be an interesting period of time because I think there'll be a lot more robotics, a lot more AI, and how we have adjusted and adapted, and we'll have a better understanding of the impact. It's like many know the time before smartphones were available. I remember life before smartphones, and it's a different experience. And there has been a lot of great things from smartphones, and then there's been a lot of really tricky things that we've had to navigate about our own, how much we process, how much information, how we can get overwhelmed by so much information that we're absorbing and taking on. So I think these are important to take into consideration. In 2025, kind of take note, in 2026, it really starts launching off fast. Okay. The lunar nodes also shift from Aries to Libra into the Pisces and Virgo. So we go from a cardinal kind of lunar nodes in their transit, because they go backwards, right? Because they're points in the sky, or points in perspective in space, and then it shifts into Pisces, Virgo. So those who have the North Node, I have the North Node in Virgo. I have the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. So I'm approaching my lunar node return kind of thing. But that's like goes into the mutable sign. So things, when they're mutable, it means you're in kind of, for 18 months, things are what I call in the shifting sands. Think of mutable as like the shifting energy in between seasons. Okay. And then, of course, we also have the Pluto. I put the Pluto on there because it's at 1 degrees to 2 degrees, 42 minutes of Aquarius in 2025. And then the Jupiter ingress into Cancer and the Uranus ingress into Gemini. These are the bigger events of kind of what the planets, these are the ones that are like, you want to make note of these ones the most. Okay. Okay. So we've got like the laundry list of stuff that we want to take into account. And I'm only going to go into the first half of 2025, and then I'll have another live that goes into the second half because there's so many moving parts. Okay. The new moon in Capricorn, just to kind of give us a little benchmark, is on Monday. And this is, I said it in Eastern time. I don't know if you can see, because I don't know if my video is actually over that time, but the time is 5:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 30th. And then this is from the perspective of Washington, D.C., okay? So you can change your time zone based from East Coast Eastern Standard Time, all right? And I just want to kind of get a benchmark here, okay? So we have right out of the gate, we can see Mars is, well, this is one of the bigger ones going on right now, is the Mars opposite the Pluto. And also here, see the nodes at the very end of the Aries and Libra. And here we have the Saturn in Pisces, and the Neptune in Pisces. And these are kind of the strong movements I want to be paying attention to, right? Just kind of taking a snapshot of like where those planets are, from a perspective. Now you can create a chart from astro.com or astro-seek.com and create it for your city and get a glance at the new moon. Because I kind of look at like what's the new moon kind of setting up for the new year, because as we go into January 1, then that's moving that moon along, and as we entered into the new year. Okay, so that's kind of where the planets are. We have several planets in retrograde as we enter that new moon on December 30th, with Uranus is in retrograde, Jupiter's in retrograde, Mars is in retrograde. Yeah, that's what we have on the retrogrades. And Mercury is still not quite past the point of where it's stationed retrograde. It has to get to 22 Sag to go beyond the degrees of where it already traced. So this new moon still has a trace of that Mercury retrograde in it. So that lunar cycle will have a little bit of the old and the new. Okay. So I want to make note of that. So point of perception, that's Mercury. Okay. All right. So moving on, I also want to make note that December 7th was for Washington, D.C., Mars, that's when Mars stationed retrograde, and that's this right here in the chart. And so Mars, I think that this is a key planet for action, taking courage in conflict, and these kinds of things that are how we are courageous or bravely speaking, or being using our will. And so Mars it's really important to kind of watch what's going on with your life and relationship to Mars outwardly expressed, like the bravado. That's a Mars in Leo, but it's now stationed on December 7th of 2024 to go retrograde. And so that we bring that into the new year. Okay. And so we're kind of moving through some things right out of the gate that's related to that. So it's kind of inward focused, but there will be outer events that happen because of that. Okay. So I'm just going to point out some of these as basics. Okay. Let's see, what else do I want to bring up? And then I already covered that one. Let's go. Oh, also the new moon on December 30th, that new moon is out of bounds. And that means it's going to be more potent in Capricorn, feeling the burden of the duty. So a moon in Capricorn feels the burden of duty and responsibility, right? So that feels extraordinarily heightened. And so there will be a lot going on because that is the sun in Capricorn and the new moon is in Capricorn. So there's an intensification, the potential for feeling melancholy after the holidays increases, but it can be extraordinarily so. But this is also, there's been so much going on in the United States around classism because of what's been going on with the incident with the CEO being murdered in New York recently, and for United Healthcare. And so that is huge around classism. And I think this will really start to like be visible about classism subjects and that kind of content. It continues to increase through that whole lunar cycle, from the new moon in Capricorn, even greater. Okay, so that's to watch. I mean, that really takes it to the extremes. Okay, all right, and I already have that Mars re-enters Cancer on January 6th. Here's that chart. I like to kind of see when something's retrograde, when it switches from the one sign to another sign. What is it activating at the same time that it's making that movement? Right here, we can see that's when Mars is at 29:59 of Cancer. The vertex is very close because of the placement of the moon and the ascendant of the moment. The sun, moon, and the ascendant, and the vertex is like a faded point in perspective. So that 3 degrees of Leo is very interesting at that moment. Okay, and that's opposite the Pluto. And so it kind of accentuates the opposition to the Pluto in Aquarius. So this is this can be show us events or kind of how people will behave moving. And then there's the potential for the courage can be pulled back, but the desire to protect increases. Like when Mars is in Cancer, the desire to protect will increase, but it will have a hard time being as successful as it was when it was in Leo, right? Does it make sense what I'm saying there? Just because of the nature of Mars and Cancer, it will really draw on that. Now, you also have the moon in Aries at 9 degrees, and that 9 degrees of Aries is very key, remember? So isn't that's going to be a very interesting moment. January 6th is also the anniversary of the events that happened as the Trump was leaving office in 2021? Yeah, 2021. January 6th of 2021. So I would say that there's going to be events that kind of trickle up on that day, relative that he's moving into the office later in January, right? So there's going to be a lot around that. This is interesting because it's activating with that moon at 9 degrees. There's like this interesting relationship between Mars and the moon on the moment that Mars is moving into Cancer while it's in retrograde, opposing the Pluto. There's a lot going on there. And hopefully that's helpful to kind of pinpoint, like kind of put a little star on January 6th, 2025, because Mars in Cancer is in a mutual reception with the moon. So there can be some activity that's protective, but also conflict driven because the moon is in Aries. Okay, important to note. At that moment, also now Mercury is beyond the degrees it was in the retrograde. It's come out of that, but it's not quite into Capricorn yet. So there can still be. Mercury is about perception and communication. So when it's in Sagittarius, it has it can take on the frame of more faith and hope and kind of the religious wording and language and ideas, or more spiritual, because it might be more, someone might think of focusing on meditation and these kinds of things. Mercury, once it gets into Capricorn, will be more strategic and more logical, while it's in Sagittarius, it's a little bit more faith-based and that kind of thing, okay? And it has a little bit of a confusing sense to it, but it's more confused. Mercury, when it's transiting in Pisces, has a little bit more of what's the fog, what's the reality here, not sure, right? Because Mercury would rather be logical than, that's when it's in its strength of how it can manifest things, right? Okay, so now in January, we have the true north node. We take calculation by true or mean for the nodes. Many astrologers base things off the true node. I could not calculate the true node chart, but it moves into Pisces on January 11th, and that's an important day for the true node. For the mean node, and that's Stephen Forrest, when you're evolutionary astrology, with Stephen Forrest, he calculates charts with the mean node. A lot of my system is set up that way. I tried to do the switch of it, and my system didn't like that when I tried to do that, so I had to restart my computer. So I have to get that fixed. But the mean node, I do have a chart for that. So this is kind of a quick chart look at the mean node as it moves into Pisces. So we can see that as soon as the north node, mean node, or even just the north node moves into Pisces, there is an it accentuates Neptune. So it accentuates imagination, make believe, these kind of very fuzzy, and think of impressionist art like Monet, right? That's very fuzzy like that, very creative like that. Things can be pulled out of the unconscious for creativity. So I think that's an interesting uh, moment in January, at the end of January. At the same time, you have Venus in there, so also adding to the heightened creativity, making something beautiful, music, these kinds of things. And that's also connected to maybe even liking having a connection with something in the heavenly realms, right? So dreams would be magnificent during that period of time if you do dream work. So pay attention to that. It's at the end of when, as that moon moves into Pisces, that would even heighten it even more, right? So that'll be interesting. So that's really an interesting period of time for creativity, but also maybe a little bit difficult to tell what's real. Like things will be like, is that real? Because there'll be like a question mark on it, right? Because there's so much Pisces. Um, but Mercury at that period of time is then in Aquarius and Pluto in Aquarius. So there's going to be kind of this new coming online awareness of something in technology that's, wow, that's here now. It's emerging more. We're accessing it more. And as Mercury moves beyond Pluto and into like a trine with the Jupiter, that will be communicated a lot more. People will be trying it out, communicating, talking about it, right? So there's that kind of shifting happening end of January and into February. Okay, so that's interesting. We still have Mars in Cancer at that period of time. It's almost to the point where it's going to station, but it's got another, 25 some days or something. So that's still working on that. So that is the lunar mean node shift. And the lunar nodes stay in a sign for 18 months. So this is an 18-month period of time of the north node in Pisces in transit and the south node in Virgo. Okay, and so that's where the eclipses will be around these nodes. Okay. All right. So moving forward, we're going to look at another important time is Jupiter will station direct. So Jupiter's been in Gemini, and we've had Jupiter in Gemini retrograde since October of 2024. But here we are looking at when it finally stations direct. Yay. Now, a new outer expression of Jupiter coming online. And it's happening at 11 degrees, 16 minutes. So anyone who has that something at 11 degrees, 16 minutes, or even just a few degrees off, +5 on either side. I really like tight orbs of 3 degrees off of something. But if you could, with Jupiter and Saturn, you can kind of look at 5 to 7 degree orbs as well to get some kind of themes coming in. Okay. But they're really, truly, truly active when it's about 3 degrees or exact, right? So Jupiter, when it's stationing direct, will activate anyone who's Pisces rising, anyone who is Sagittarius rising, and then Sun, Moon also, because Jupiter then turns it on moving forward, and now it's an expression out. Okay, so I'm Jupiter ruled with my Sun in Sagittarius, my Venus in Sagittarius, so that'll be a lovely period. So things that I've been thinking about and contemplating, learning will have more of an outward expression after that moment in February. That's February 4th, okay? So that's coming online, and this is at 4:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and of course, it will be like at 1:40 a.m. on Pacific Standard Time. So we have that. What else I like to point out? When the Jupiter is stationing direct, it also, the Sun is trine, Mercury is trine, So there's a lot really being communicated. So this is just really lighting up the cerebral part of us around the planet, and it's like in the same element as Pluto. So there's a lot of dynamics that are now starting to get more outwardly expressed, and build things being built upon what something has learned. Okay, while it's been in the retrograde cycle. Okay. Um, yeah, so I just want to point that out. And anyone with any angle like sun or moon or any of your angles in Gemini or Aquarius or Libra is getting that accentuated, and it's kind of like, feels good. It's up. It's a lift. Okay. So that's good to keep in mind for that. And then next on the calendar, we have the Neptune will conjunct the true north node in Pisces. I built the chart, but again, I have the mean node on my computer, so it's not really showing exact. You can see it's very close from this is a mean node, but from the true node, it would be exact, right? But you can see that conjunction. That's a very important moment because that's a moment where when the node, it's just accentuating kind of like understanding something beyond Neptune. Like Neptune is in Pisces is like it's surrendering. There's something bigger going on, but at the same time, I would say you surrender what your expectations of the outcome are, but something bigger is going on. But the consciousness of the collective is, creating something. And it's also being it's almost like it's coming online. More people are coming online, aware of how powerful the unconscious mind is of each individual that's tied into the collective that creates, the sphere of our experience, right? So in terms of our systems, in terms of our perceptions, but there's so many layers going on that it's like, what's going on? You like, it might be hard to see like a hardcore reality truth that people like would acknowledge as that's true and real versus is that an illusion in front of my eyes, right? So it can kind of be like that, right? So that's in there. It's going to be 2025 has got some interesting things coming out of the bag, right? Very interesting period of time. Let's see. Okay, so that's Neptune conjunct the node. And then Mars will then station direct around February 23rd of 2025, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we want to pay attention to Mars. And when Mars goes to station direct, guess what? Moon is opposite. So this is very challenging emotionally for people because it is the burden of something being realized, because the Mars wants to protect, but there's also the weight of responsibility with the moon, and the moon and Mars are they're not in the moon rules the Cancer that the Mars is in. Capricorn, there is an affinity for Mars in Capricorn because Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So Mars, when it's in Capricorn, has more of strategy at play. So it kind of makes me wonder about the collective people coming together to realize their power, or they're dealing with like having to strategize how they're going to do something about it. Okay. There might be something that's unfolding and people are gathering to figure something out. Okay. And there's, because of the node on the Neptune on the north node there, what's the real thing? What's being looked at? You see? So it's going to be interesting, kind of those moments. And as we get closer to those moments, we'll have some storylines, and of course, in the general population, either in the United States, it might be in another area of the globe, it could be in Europe, it could be in France. There's so many countries going through big changes right now. I've seen Germany in the news, France in the news, UK in the news, US in the news. Brazil, you probably have something too, because Brazil has, it's kind of who is in power and what is going on, right? So there's some interesting things going on. I'll also see, like, I pay attention to the leaders of certain countries, like because of like Canada as well, and Mexico, because they're my neighbors up, south and north of the United States. And so there's so much going on in the world. You kind of have to be looking at what are the themes that are the people against the power is a big one right now. And so kind of like I'm watching that, like, as an observer, as an astrologer, looking at what are the themes, what is being pulled out, what are the activities, and how is that a repeating pattern from, the beginnings of my country, or, what France went through in the 1780s, right? Like, what's being the people up against some kind of idea, right? Or power, or person of power, or a couple people of power, right? So that's a big theme to take into consideration for 2025, and what is going to be woven into some of these planetary transits and things that we're going to be moving through and navigating through. And we have our macro experience of being like a citizen of a country or on the globe, and there's a lot of things happening just from natural disasters and having to manage through those things, and how technology is working or not working in our life, and then moving forward and navigating through, right? There's a lot to be to take into consideration. Okay, so that's Mars station direct in Cancer, end of February. All right, and then Venus is going to station retrograde March 1st, and that is at 7:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're looking at Venus, when she's going retrograde, will be in Aries. And guess what? On 10 degrees of Aries. That's a very hot degree. 9 degrees, that like 9, 10, those 3 degrees around 9 degrees are super active. And here Venus is stationing retrograde. One of the things about Venus when it goes retrograde, it's like the Inanna going into the underworld, and you should look up that and understand that process of when Venus is going from the position here as evening star, and it'll go backwards and go past the sun. It'll cazimi the sun and then come out station to go and will become morning star and then back. Okay, so it's really important to kind of pay attention. I always watch things, and there's a couple astrologers I follow, and just because there's so much work to do in astrology, I'd be constantly at my desk. I'm practically that way anyway. But it is going to be intense. It really is. And I think when Venus is in retrograde and she's in Aries, this is a very interesting cycle to pay attention to. I love Nick Dagan Best. I'll put this on the community page, but he does a lot with Chris Brennan, who does the astrology podcast, and he does a lot of historical work around Venus when Venus goes retrograde, and he has different kinds of Venus retrograde. Okay, he's labeled them, and he's done extensive work, and I love his work. It's incredible, but it's amazing because it shows like periods of time when things go increase for conflict with national leaders of certain places on the globe. And so the intensity of conflict can increase during this period of time. I know that sounds bizarre when I'm bringing in Venus, but it's almost like it's something about the positioning of it within. I don't know if it's in the leaders or if it's in the country and the charts of the country. So if it's just like the pattern that exists within going into conflict. So not that I like to speak about conflict. No, I prefer peace. Thank you very much. But sometimes people have to rise up and take care of business about taking back the power that slowly has been slipping out of their fingers because of certain laws or certain ways of things, how they've materialized over time slowly, and eventually people will be like, no, we're not having that. You know what I mean? So and especially I think in the United States, France for sure. France has a lot of like, uh, I love seeing that, the beauty of the people come into life to like, no, we're gonna tell you what we think and we're gonna take an action on it. Um, but I can see the patterns. The question is how does the pattern unfold? It's like a fractal, and how extensive does it go? And it might not be an ideal time for certain things because of just that could manifest into a bigger conflict across more than one nation, right? So there's that. I mean, if you just look straight at something, um, it would, I definitely see it in the United States where that could be on deck because of who's going to be in the position of power. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and these kinds of things as things get lined up that by those choices that power wants to take, right? So, but what do the people do? Like, I'm curious about what the people will do, and that's why I think the Aries ingress chart will tell me, but a lot. So that's what Wade Caves has to bring out on that Aries ingress. I can't wait to see his Aries ingress webinar. I'll be studying it before we get to that point, but Aries ingress tells me where the people are and what the situation is with the people and how they're going to behave. Okay. And so you have, every nation will have an Aries ingress, and so it's, where's the moon? That's the people. All right. Um, of course, that's mundane astrology. I don't do a lot of that, but I do like keep my finger on the tab a little bit, So that's the Venus stationing retrograde March 1st, and it's a very important event, planetary transit. Okay, and then we have the lunar eclipse like 14 days later, March 14th. And is this the chart for that? The lunar eclipse. Yeah, so this is the lunar eclipse on March 14th. It's at 2:55 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then it is, and that's Washington, D.C. So on the West Coast, it'll be like March 13th, okay, at 11:55 p.m. So lunar, when we get into eclipse season, eclipses are very, very important to pay attention to because they activate things, especially the few days before, and of course for weeks after, right? But definitely really big events can happen for people in the week before. Um, uh, so this lunar eclipse is in Virgo. So 23 of Virgo is the moon. And it's so then we have that on the south node. So you see this part in the chart here. This is the south node. So when the moon is making that at a south node, the sun is in Pisces at the north node. Okay, so and there's a lot going on in Pisces, and so that, but the moon is going to, the Earth will come in between, and so then the moon is eclipsed by that movement of the Earth between the sun. Okay, and so, but it's a south node expression of it, and so that will pull the intensity into Virgo moon is more like almost like a little bit of going really into the humble piece of Virgo. But Virgo is also about I like to think of it also as a part of our health and our nutrition. What's going on there? How is that? What might be affected in our ability to do that, or our daily routines are affected. Virgo is into the details. So is there pieces of information that are being blocked? Something like that. I also think of if something is ruled by Mercury, and this is so Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, and an interesting look at that Mercury right there. that Mercury is stationing direct the next day on March 15th. I'll have that chart here. But you can see the 9 degrees of Aries is again highlighted, right? So there's something going on. Now, we could kind of think of Moon from at least from the standpoint of people. There's something getting blocked out for the people, right? What is it? Perception and their ability to act in some way? Because Mercury in Aries wants to like take action, wants to courageously take action, but there's something getting blocked in information or details, something in the real world. There's something going on here in that regard. Pisces can be like there's an illusion of something created, but is that block? Is there something blocking? This is South Node. It's kind of like there's some kind of loss around that. Feeling safe is not feeling safe here, right? This is more a contracted moon, feeling loss, or feeling that kind of, or a little bit of what I call humble pie. You guys have that phrase, humble pie? You know what that means? It's having to uh, take in the awareness of new information that would possibly feel like you've got shame or something attached to it in some identity. Okay. So let me give you an example. So in like the United States, there's an idea in the United States among many citizens that there's like some idealism that's off the charts, right? But the reality is like plenty need to have a little bit of humble pie of what our true identity is on the global stage and then adjust to that, right? That could be part of the theme here, right? Um, is that related to the people? That could be. Just like in the recent election, there was a great portion who wanted one result and many wanted another result. And so that was even in the astrology predictions, more people, there was a greater number, I think, that were predicting something that they wanted versus what was the reality of the situation underneath it all. So it's kind of important to pay attention to what is the temperature of the situation of a collective, like a national collective, but also there's like United States, there's Canada, every country has its own, but there's even community, like we have the states. I live in Washington State. I have home in Oregon. My sister's in Oregon, so I'm very tied into what's going on in Washington State and Oregon State because we have state laws, and there's different, like almost a feeling in each state is quite different. And you may have that the same in Brazil, like where you have I don't know if they're provinces, maybe it's called. I know it's in Canada there's provinces. I don't know if in Brazil you have provinces. I'll have to like look on the map. I can't remember. France, there's like regions in France and regions or areas in like even in the UK. Every country has regions, and there might be certain hot things going on in your own region as well, because there's like a little bit more going on at the community level as well, right? So there's a lot going on from your community, your city, out towards the region or the province or the state that you live in, and then that kind of thing. So it's kind of like all the way from the community level or your individual home, all the way out into you as a global citizen, right? And we're going into the awareness of like, yeah, planet Earth, but what else might we be aware of this year that takes us beyond? Right there, that's the Neptune and Pisces, guys, and the North Node being in there, but also with the Pluto in Aquarius, that is bringing in the awareness of higher technology, like almost like we're going to be ready to leap into a higher understanding. Imagine the moment when you first got a smartphone, how much the difference between of the past life and the moment forward from getting your smartphone, of how having the accessibility in your hand versus just on a laptop and doing email and so forth, right? Or going even back further, I remember when the internet turned on. You know how much the world has changed since then, right? So that's this kind of year, like 25 and into the early 26, how things are going to be. Something else is emerging that, and I think it's artificial intelligence, but there are other technologies that are just going to quantum leap for us. Okay. Um, so the lunar eclipse activates a lot in the late degrees of Pisces and Virgo, the moon in Virgo on the south node. Okay. Okay. Moving forward, the next day, like I said, the Mercury station's retrograde um, at 9 degrees of Aries. That 9 degrees is so significant for 2025. Just incredible. Um, so you kind of like, where is 9 degrees? Where is Aries in my chart, and what house does it sit in? Because that is a hot spot in the life for 2025. And so you'll see things manifesting there, okay, and unfolding with that. So there it is. There's Mercury right there. And at the moment that it's stationing retrograde, Venus is just at 7 degrees. So going is also in its retrograde pattern. So it's like, oh, so when planets station retrograde, they're going to go into the underworld. They become what I call, we know this as the cycle, Mercury as psychopomp. Okay. It's the guide into the underworld. So if you think about the story of Ceres, you guys will maybe know in the Greek myth is Ceres, also known as Demeter from the Roman, goes into the underworld to negotiate with Hades to get out Persephone. Yeah, that's that whole Mercury is her guide to get there. Mercury with the invisible helmet can go and traverse between the worlds. But you have to understand that your consciousness can also navigate between the finite world of living in the third dimension in this world, but also can navigate into other dimensional awareness. That's what your dream is. And when you have a dream, that's other dimensional perspective. Okay. But you may also be amazed by mediums. Same concept. They have the ability to go into the other dimension or receive information in picture form from a dimension. So this is fascinating material. You might be interested in these subjects this year, looking into, well, how that's interesting. I've always been fascinated by that dimensional awareness because I have North Node in Pisces. I have Jupiter in Scorpio. I'm interested in the hidden kind of stuff. I'm fascinated by near-death experiences. What is a soul experience when it passes on but does come back? These have always been fascinating to me. You may find that as well, that these subjects come forward. More interest in things that have been hidden knowledge, and you want to like explore it more. Okay. So these journeys into the underworld by these planets mean that the consciousness has to go through some kind of process, and there is a burning off the old as you go in, right? It's like you're going into the underworld experience, and then there's some kind of pearl of wisdom in that experience when you get there, and then you come back out, right? So it's a process, though. There are great books, and I will share those at another time, but that can help you understand some of those, that process. The astrology is lovely to have just to go in and to explore. Oh, this is what's kind of the step by step as you go, right? And you have something to observe the symbol in that movement by looking at it in just a flat chart, right? Two-dimensional chart, right? Point to point. But that will be a very interesting retrograde because it's Mercury in Aries going back into water in Pisces and then coming back out. Okay. All right. And then moving forward, we're into March 20th when the sun makes its ingress into Aries. Here, that is called the spring equinox or the vernal equinox. This is a very important chart wherever you create it. So Washington, D.C. This is the chart I have for I'm watching DC this year, guys. Normally I also make one from my own home city, but you can make your own for your own home city and look at where is the sun. Well, this one's not even showing up as the sun ingress, did it? It pulled it at 29. Look at that, 59. So it's like the next minute. It's 5:01 something seconds. Hold on, I gotta see this. I just noticed it didn't pull exactly. It's really in the seconds. I can't even pull it while I'm on the live. But essentially, that pulls into Aries right there at 0000 of Aries. It's 5:01 in some seconds. I don't have the seconds on it. Let me see if I can see it here. Give me 1 second. March 20th. I'll have to correct this in my part 2, so when I show it again. March 20th, it enters, yeah, it says 5:01 a.m., but when I pull it in the solar fire, I have to actually pull it a little bit more into the seconds after that because it's not exact. So so what's important about the Aries, the sun going into Aries, is that's an exalted sun at the beginning of the calendar perspective from the zodiacal understanding, right? And we look at that. Now we look at it from the northern hemisphere perspective. So southern hemisphere, I know some people flip the charts to look at them, but you can still read charts from northern hemisphere perspective. But you can kind of get great insights from a flipped perspective of the chart from the southern hemisphere when you look at that, because I know it's all seasonal, right? But in the Aries ingress of the sun, March 20th at 5:01 a.m. plus some seconds, and to push that all the way over, Venus is retrograde, Mercury is retrograde. That's really interesting. Both are retrograde. Within a day or two of the Venus being cazimi the sun, and it's a good thing to experience when a planet is cazimi the sun, when it's really like within 17 minutes of arc of the sun is really when it's in the chariot with the sun. There's the kind of a protective thing that's going on with that planet and the sun. So it's kind of interesting. Like I always paid what's going on during a cazimi, like what's happening. And the Venus is trine the moon, and also Mercury, but they are retrograde. So there's kind of like awareness happening by that underworld journey that people will take in understanding something. And then, and here I also think this is interesting because remember when I told you that the moon is very important when it is in the Aries ingress chart, because it tells us about people. What are the people doing? And look at that moon. It's at the top of the chart, and it's in the 10th house, and it's in Sagittarius. So there is an accentuation of beliefs. There might be religious a tone. There can be a religious tone, but it also may be how people are dealing with the allies that we have, and also high philosophy and learning. So the Sagittarius is definitely like how we look at like long travel journeys that you have to get on a plane to go to, right? But it's like in the relationship with being in a foreign place, that kind of like you've journeyed so far from home, that kind of thing. That is important. But also, so that's very interesting about the Aries ingress chart, that the moon is in Sagittarius and at the top of the chart for Washington, D.C. That tells me that the people have quite a pull during that year that from that Aries ingress chart. So up until that point, there may be a lot going on, but we're not quite even to the point where Neptune has made its ingress, because the Neptune makes the ingress into Aries on March 30th, and I'll do that chart next. But it's kind of interesting to kind of see these components. But also, that moon is sextile to the Pluto, so it makes it quite powerful in that expression. And the moon, the moon's sign Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, is in Gemini, and so there's something interesting going on, kind of at home or homeland. So that's kind of interesting. But there's also what's going on in the education system. I kind of wonder about what is happening in the education system that might be really what activates a lot of people around some kind of theme. So that's kind of interesting on this Aries ingress, what's going on here. Yeah. I know already in my state and in my county and in my school district, there's struggling with what was cut from budgets, and how they're trying to manage that in the coming year. My daughter is graduating from high school this year, so but the children still in this district are going to be struggling with, those things that are missing from what was known before. So there's going to be some adjustments, and I don't understand all the ins and outs of the budgetary how and why, but they're having to go after certain grant dollars now to run programs and things like that they've had here. So it'll be an interesting, maybe it's state by state, I think, in those situations. So but you kind of have to pay attention to your community, right? Okay, so moving on to one of the biggest ones of the year. It's the Neptune ingress into Aries on March 30th at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And here's that chart. So there is the Neptune in Aries at 0 degrees. And this is happening just 10 days off of the Aries ingress of the sun. So the sun is right there amplifying within 10 degrees. And so that's a dynamic moment. And it'll be interesting the weeks, the days before that ingress and even the days after, because there's always events right around that period of time that get amplified, the energy and the archetypal. And so I think that's important to pay attention to. We also have the moon in Aries. Chiron is next to the moon in Aries. So are we collectively pressing forward in some kind of the will of the people, or how we're working through that, right? So there's that. But also Mars is in Cancer at 23 degrees, and it's just still trying to tick forward from after it's stationed direct at the end of February. This is the end of March, and it's the ruler of the Aries. So it's kind of an interesting moment. But the moon is also in Aries. So moon and Mars are in mutual reception in this moment. So that's a very interesting moment, March 30th. So it's going to be interesting about what the will of the people comes forward, what kind of courageous actions are taking place, and that kind of thing. Because Aries is also known for being pioneering. So we may see certain inventions and new technology, or there's new ideas coming to those who are creating something or have an idea to create something. These are moments of innovation and pioneering coming online. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that's important, because as we move further and further for the Pluto in the Aquarius, that will actually be dropping in pretty significantly for us. So that's important to point out as well. Also in that Neptune ingress chart, which I will do a deeper dive on this chart, because there are so many themes that you want to start peeling the onion on, because it speaks to the themes of the entire cycle, or the period. Neptune will be in Aries for about 14 years. So Neptune is in a sign for 14 years. It's a significant amount of time. And so it's important to kind of pay attention to those details when you kind of look at the ingress chart. And I like to pull that back layer by layer to look at kind of what are the themes, and then look back and reflect on the previous cycle of when Neptune was at Aries, which I will pull that forward in a more deep dive on that subject as we get closer to that date, okay? Because I think it's more interesting because things are happening and coming online and more forward in the mind, because we still have other things that are happening that that's kind of there, but it's still a little bit out there, right? That's 3 months in the future. So that's really important about Neptune in its ingress into Aries. Okay, and then moving forward here, we have then, oh, I forgot to mention just a couple days before that, Venus re-enters Pisces 3 days before that ingress. And so Venus will trip over at 4:40 and a few seconds, because again, I'm noticing that it's not quite populating over to when it clicks over. Didn't catch that, so I'm gonna have to catch that next time. But it does enter Pisces, re-enters Pisces on March 27th, just after 4:40 a.m. And then that'll be, what's nice about Venus in Aries is there's an amplification of beautiful things exalted. There might be some kind of experience that it can be feel beautiful. It's almost like agape love, right? So there's maybe something going on that pulls that in, that experience. There's something if you are focused in on something that's artistic and beautiful, it can give you an experience of almost like beholding the beloved, okay? It's really beautiful energy. Okay, moving forward to Mercury stationing direct in April on the 7th at 7:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 26 Pisces, 49 minutes. Here we see that stationing direct, and it's stationing direct right on the North Node. Now, this is the mean North Node, and so anyone with planets or angles or nodes, Sun, this is important, or the Moon, day, because it's really getting activated by Mercury. So there's an opportunity to perceive something new, to lean in something that's available for us to see that we couldn't see before. But it still has a bit of a fog around it because it's still Mercury in Pisces, right? There's still, like, I would say, it might move the belief forward that there's that there's the potential for that. So imagine people who didn't believe something before, and then something was made visible, and now like, oh, I believing it more. But there's still the desire to understand it with a little bit more concrete absolutes around it, like, you know, have it investigated, have it touched, all that kind of stuff. So that's interesting in this moment in April. When Mercury stations direct. When Mercury re-enters Aries, there's a little bit more concrete idea about the thing, and then it's progressing faster, right? So it can stimulate. Okay, it also can be the stimulation of from powers be, you know, like leaders could stimulate people's beliefs and activate them in this kind of energy as well, right? So there's a word to the caution for how much you give your power to leaders versus knowing something from the inside, from your soul and your guide there, right? So that's important. That Mercury, when it's stationing, is also trine the Mars, and Mars is in Cancer. So there might be the activating of people's religious and their beliefs with, there's been some kind of illusion that's been still there, because that's all kind of beliefs and that kind of thing. And Mars can activate it as, well, we want to protect, right? So Mars in Cancer wants to protect, but it can be used if people aren't careful about what is the truth behind it all. You know what I mean? So there's something to that in here. And I would, you know, pay attention, look for the details, look for the investigation of truth, right? And what's real on the matter. Sometimes it takes a lot to get to the real matter, right? So you have to like consider your sources, and consider there's a reality that when you go out in your community, you can see you can see and touch certain things, right? You can hear things, you can see things, you can smell things. But if it's coming through a digital format, what is it, right? Because we have artificial intelligence coming online in a real dynamic way. So then it's our challenge then to adapt to how good are your ears and how good are your eyes about perceiving what is artificial or not. And it's going to be harder and harder to detect. Okay, I think that's important too. Okay, so that's the Mercury stationing direct, April 7th. Then April 12th, Venus stations direct, and Venus stations direct in Pisces, 24 degrees of Pisces, right next to Saturn. That's in terms of romance, that can be a connection for committing into a relationship, that kind of energy. It can get serious. There's a lot. I mean, I see it with the moon and Libra. I could kind of see that relationship kind of stuff that there. But the Chiron with the sun tells me that there is a bit of woundedness around the right to exist as one is. Chiron in Aries is, but I have the right to exist as I am, exactly as I am as a human. And then what's going on in the peripheral of the world that you engage in that complicates your right to your humanity, right? Like this is super important. So the Venus stationing direct, we can see that connection between having maybe a relationship to our own individual relationship to a higher understanding, higher consciousness, what is in the realms beyond what is visible. Because, light is only visible on the spectrum to a certain degree. There's other light that is invisible to our eye, but is out there. What is that? And, like understanding our world, understanding the physics of our world a little more will help us understand some of this. But there's also what is of the world, third dimension, and then is there anything that we're getting invited to perceive? Either a lot of people go through explorations when like, what is it when, people have a near-death experience? What is that other experience? You're kind of like maybe looking at other realms and dimensional experiences to understand like, third dimension physicality, your physical body, and then what is it beyond? And what is the part of us that can kind of engage with that in some way, either by people who've had the experience of a near-death experience, or even people who are mediums or psychic and they get psychic awareness. All humans have the potential for psychic awareness. It's actually been turned down so much by the way society is now. And then what gets turned on now by what's going on? Does our intuition increase? Does our desire to practice and turn on our intuition increase because we need to be able to adapt to a quickly and changing world because of artificial intelligence? We need to be able to detect what is really human and what is not, right? So there's something to that as well in this as we go into 25 and 26 and beyond. Okay, so Venus stationing direct here with a stack of planets in a stellium in Pisces. All right. Okay, moving forward here, we're almost getting through. Now we're going into eclipse season. There's going to be a solar eclipse on 9 degrees of Aries. I pointed that out when I was going through the eclipses. 9 degrees of Aries is a super hot degree this year in 2025 by many planets, but definitely with the solar eclipse there and other planets that station on that degree or near that degree. Excuse me. So important. Solar eclipse in Aries. Here are the moon and the sun and the moon. And that's where, and then the node, which is why it's an eclipse, is at 26 Pisces. And so you get an eclipse when those are close, within 15 degrees. We definitely have that. So we have an eclipse. I think these are partial eclipses, if I'm not mistaken, but I will double check that here. I think it's important to always pay attention the week before an eclipse, and this is on March 29th, and it looks like, when is that exactly? Let's see here. In my book, it's like 3:58 a.m. Pacific time, 6:58 Eastern Daylight Time. It's not telling me in this particular book, but I know that when I look it up on another, I don't know if you guys have the tool, but there's a website called cafeastrology.com. And when you go there, you can look up the eclipse and it'll tell you if it's an annular eclipse or partial, or if it's a total eclipse. Okay. And where you can also do other searches for like seeing where the shadow of the eclipse is on the planet. And those places that receive the shadow more directly would experience that more intensely. Okay. So that's important to kind of keep in mind. But again, the solar eclipse on March 29th, and the is so close to the also this the Neptune ingress into Aries on March 30th, right? So this period of time is really significant. Probably have those out of order a little bit, but yeah, that should actually be up higher. But anyway, that is important. Okay, so solar eclipse. What I want to point out beyond the 9 degrees, Chiron's still in Aries. Mercury is retrograde in Aries at 0 degrees, 28 minutes. And so it's really activating also Aries and the Neptune. So this is a stimulation within the consciousness and the perception. Okay. So this is very important of what it stimulates in our consciousness for us all. But definitely more impactful for people who have planets within that early degrees of Aries, and also the late degrees of Pisces. Okay. And that, so that's important. Going on to, we see the Neptune ingress chart here, which I discussed. And let's go into the Saturn ingress. The Saturn ingress into Aries is, I would think, is like the third most important, because the Uranus ingress into Gemini is probably the second most important because of the size of the planet and how long it's in a sign. Saturn is in a sign for 2.5 years. I think I said at some other point, I might have said 3 years, but it's actually 2.5 years and a sign. And so here is Saturn, its ingress into Aries. As you can see, it's not quite catching up to Neptune. And they won't catch up to each other until February of 2026. And we'll get more in depth on that in the future. But this is just the beginnings. It's the speaking to the beginning. So we always look at an ingress chart for what is this chapter of Saturn in Aries about. And I think it's something pioneering. I think it's something about what's going on with us in our consciousness and how we might manage ourselves through some conflict, and how that restricts our movements and how we are, and also how are we perceiving other dimensional things. Okay, there's something pioneering about this energy, so something can be created that's brand new and pioneering that changes the paradigm of our relationship with technology. If you have no planets, Maxie, in your Aries house, that's you. There's still things that are active there, but your consciousness is more active wherever the planets are in your chart. I can speak to that more on another. But when you have an empty house, like in this chart has empty houses here, that doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that these two houses, this house, 11th house, is ruled by Jupiter. That's Sagittarius on the cusp. And on the cusp here, this is like a double, because This chart is created with Placidus. If I was creating a whole house, whole sign house, you'd only see Sagittarius in the 12th. But I've got this built in a quadrant house system, which is called Placidus, which evolutionary astrology uses. So Jupiter is extra important. But Saturn is the ruler of the ascendant, which is the ruling, is the angle, and is one of the most important angles. So this Saturn ingress chart for DC, Washington, DC, is really important for the entire cycle of Saturn in not only in just in the 2.5 years that it's in Aries. Okay, so if you have an empty empty Aries, it's not about the empty house. It's about the ruling planet of Mars. Okay, Saturn comes into that Aries, Neptune comes into that house, and what are they aspecting else in your chart, right? So the transits activate something, but it's also how is the Mars in your own chart by position, by house, and what it's aspecting about, how that will manifest or not manifest. Some people like it's often a house that's a little bit more hidden, and maybe you're observing it in other people. It's not directly you. It's more of an observation point. Does that make sense? So hopefully that makes sense. So in this particular chart, we're looking at Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn, and that Saturn conjunct the Neptune, to me, is articulating something that's very dynamic. There's a little bit of activity that has a surrendering factor to it, or it's been blown up and we're getting swept up into something collectively out of DC, and then the people, could be acting in another way about what they want over that course of that period of time. There could be a counterpoint, like because the Saturn is like the authority figure wants X, but the people want something else, like with this kind of combination that I'm seeing here. So do you understand what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that. I can go into other explanations of that when you have an empty house, but it's not really an empty experience. It's more that it's not about, this one is about the identity of leadership in DC, Washington, DC, and what is new and what's not going well, and what is getting swept up in conflict or whatnot. But then how will that materialize out over a couple of years, right? What do the people do? Because the ingress tells me also the people want something that's more stable. They want Moon and Taurus, right? So there's kind of that kind of thing to pay attention to. In your personal chart, you kind of have to look at, and then where's the Mars? And the Mars is in Leo over here. And the reason I want to bring in Mars to kind of explain a little bit about the chart is it's the ruler of the Aries. So when Mars is in Leo in this chart, it tells me it's going to have a lot of bravado. It's going to be out in the world, or this is like other countries giving back to us a pushback, right? Like the behavior of the authority figure in Washington, D.C. will have interest in something and want to take, will want to take decisive action on something or get swept up in something, but the result will be a backlash from from others. Does that make sense? So you kind of have to kind of put all the pieces together. And there's two sides to the story because the sun is in Gemini, so there'll be two truths to be looking at. Okay? I hope that makes sense because there's a lot of layers to look at. But when you have an ingress chart, you're looking at what are the themes of that planet entering that sign, and that gives us some kind of indicator of what that energy will have over that 2.5 years that Saturn is in Aries. Okay, and then it'll go into Taurus, right? And and that will settle down the energy, right? So you have 2.5 years of really changeable, high intensity stuff going on with the Saturn in the Aries, amplified by the Neptune, where things can get swept up. People can get swept up in this stuff, right? You don't want them to, but they can. So it's a word, people who are looking at astrology or who play a little bit more of a cautious game, they're going to be a little bit more observant about, do I invite you into my inner circle where I like to keep my peace? You know what I mean? These kind of things. And so it'll be kind of like, who are your best friends? Who are your close, keeping your friends close, or these kinds of things, and how we take care of each other, right? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's the Saturn ingress. Very, very important moment in May 24th, right around the memorial holiday here in the United States. Okay, then the Jupiter takes its change up, and it's going to go into Cancer. I love Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is a beautiful energy, and it's exalted. Things start expanding. Themes of home can expand things of homeland for everybody around the globe, right? They'll have that kind of what's safe, but the ability to have some safety. But Jupiter in Cancer is negotiating the opposition to, the square with that Saturn and Neptune. So Jupiter has its strength. So this is a period of time where something else is coming in, and now there is activity around that, securing home, nurturing others, these kinds of things. But it's still dealing with the threat of that Saturn and the Neptune stuff, right? But Jupiter has the upper hand now. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? I hope so. And the moon at that moment of the ingress for Jupiter is in Sagittarius. So we have this is, to me, is when the people start to get an upper hand and have more activity with laws going in, or these kinds of things for protection. So we have a Jupiter in Cancer, which the moon rules Cancer, and a moon in Sagittarius, where the Jupiter rules the Sagittarius, you see. So the laws will start being activated somehow to help support the people, to protect the people, or they'll use that, right? So that's interesting. So this is going to be an interesting period of time to see how people, the collective people, come together to create a world that they want to live in, right? We are in the age of Aquarius, continues to unfold, of course, but the age of Aquarius is more where equilibrium can exist, where we've been fighting that maybe a long time in social activism stuff, and that's kind of your Libra, but it starts to take hold more as people gather to do, and it might be surprising to people about how much momentum they can get in 2025, okay, in 2026. It'll be interesting. It's going to be an interesting period of time. It's an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. So Jupiter ingress, also a very important chart. You also have Venus in Taurus, Venus in its own sign, so it's powerful in its own sign. Our allies, that'll be interesting for our allies. So other countries that our country, because this is out of DC, right? So there's going to be interesting kind of see what else that Jupiter ingress unfolds, because there'll be events around that ingress and what will take place, right? The moon and the Pluto are in sextile to each other. That's kind of, they're activating. They can see each other. But I also think that makes Mercury at 1 degree, the Jupiter, as the apex point. So that's like all that energy going up into the Jupiter and the Mercury, you see. So it's receiving the apex of the Pluto in Aquarius and the moon in Sagittarius. Extraordinary moment. This is going to be a big moment too. Yes? Okay. So a lot going on with the Jupiter ingress into Cancer. A lot of change. People will be like, really, it's a year to take note. Like take a day every week and write notes about what's going on, or make a little digital scrapbook of articles in Evernote or something like that, so you can kind of pay attention to what are the big things that are happening around these days, and can have a little collage of things. These will help you remember like how important these changing moments really are, because you'll want to come back and reflect on these moments because they are so big. Okay. And it's always nice to have a scrapbook, as they say, right? I love scrapbooks, and that's important to remember where we have come as we push forward into new frontiers and new things. And there's a lot of change coming on. And then, of course, the sun will enter into Cancer at the summer solstice on June 20th. It's at 10:42 p.m. in Washington, D.C. So the sun will have set on the East Coast for that summer solstice. But on the West Coast, well, it might, yeah, it'll have set by then. But on the West Coast, we will have the sun still up, so that we will be able to see the sun on the West Coast of the United States for that summer solstice moment, longest day of the year. And it's going to enhance and accentuate the Jupiter in Cancer as well. Interesting kind of combination. We have a couple of planets, like Mercury's also in Cancer, but it's from the DC area, it's in the 6th house. It might be in a different house on the West Coast, of course, I think. And moon is in Taurus. That's beautiful to have that moon in Taurus. That's a stabilizing moon. So if there's been a lot of noise in the first part of the year, it'll start to like maybe find some calmness, to some stability, even though there's a tension between the Pluto and the moon. Of course, there's still some tension, but the moon does stabilize, makes things a little bit more stable. So from the Aries vernal, the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of activity. And there's still going to be activity in June, of course. And of course, it's amping up for that Uranus to go into Gemini on July 7th, but I'll cover that in part 2, okay? But I really like that moon in Taurus. That's really nice to see that stabilizing energy. There is a bit of transformation going on, I think even in DC, so maybe there's been some things that have happened because of people coming together that starts to show up, that it has a stabilizing factor of some sort, right? There's something to that. We do see the moon is trine Mars in Virgo on the vertex. Makes me wonder about our relationship with our allies as a country. Your country, if you're in France or Brazil or Canada or wherever you are in the world, look at your country's chart that is used the most. You can find them on astroseek.com or astro.com. And you kind of want to look at when those when we're at the solstice or when we're at the equinox, because those are very important moments. We look, as astrologers, we look at those charts, those 4 charts in the year, the spring and fall equinox charts and the summer and winter solstice charts. These are very important charts for us to kind of understand what that period of time is going to be like for everybody on the planet, or in your country, if you're doing it from a point of view from the particular city, like your nation's capital or something, okay? Definitely in the United States, we have a lot going on. But I know that other countries also do, as I've tried to keep up on some of that international perspective from Germany and France, the UK, and I haven't seen as much in Brazil. I'd have to and by the way, yeah, if you have a good news out of a news channel that you like out of Brazil that also can translate it into English, I'd love to know which one that you guys prefer, or that you think is highly respected. That would be great. Um, Otherwise, I'm getting it from another source that's probably out of Europe. Um, Sometimes we get stuff I get stuff from the New York Times. Anyway, that's important for the summer solstice. So that is going to be my conclusion for part one on the planetary pieces. There's only a few of you guys in here. You might want to explore your favorite actors. I have their charts pulled up. We can kind of discuss. Do you guys want to discuss their charts? I want to thank you for listening for the first part one here, up to the summer solstice. From the summer solstice forward, I will do that in part two in January. Um, and I will announce that. But is there anything you want to look at about any of the early part of 25 on Nicola or even Luke? Because I pulled up their charts. Give me your question down in the chat, and I will take a look. So I have Nicola's chart up, and we can take a look at kind of like what events in the beginning of the year are going to be really drawing out for something that she may experience, or we can understand and be observers of her experience, you know, like what she, how she's walking through and navigating 2025, right? I think it's interesting because a lot of you love these actors and how you learn astrology, right? So with Nicola, some things I want to point out. Remember, Aries, the 9 degrees of Aries was a really hot point degree in 2025. And so that's right here in Nicola's chart. And so that's in her third house of communication. And if I remember, she was going to be doing, she's probably going to be at some point doing the production of the Love and War movie. And I think then that's when that Aries is really activated. But because that point gets so activated in the beginning of the year, I think Nicola will be activated as a spokesperson in a lot of ways about speaking out about something in the first part of the year. So anytime that the eclipse, the Mercury retrograde, these are points where she'll be actively communicating through her stories or through some kind of social activism thing that she is taking on to bring it into awareness, and using her celebrity, because she definitely uses her celebrity to be a spokesperson. And I wonder how much she will influence other people in how they might also begin to actually use their celebrity to speak up. So it'll be an interesting period of time for Nicola in that. Now, it can get a little tricky sometimes to navigate that energy of being a spokesperson when a lot of people historically did not want to bring that into their public spotlight. But she has purposely kept that, even with all the push negativity towards not speaking her point of view, even though that is her through and through from how she was raised by her mother and her father not being alive anymore. So she's definitely, that's a part of her mantle of how she continues to show the love that she had for her father in her everyday life, is by her social activism, right? So I think that's an important thing that will come forward. Another thing that is important for Nicola in the first half of the year is when the nodes move from Aries and go over her Mars, then the North Node will activate her Mars, and then also then enters into Pisces. So then it starts moving towards, it won't right out of the gate activate her Jupiter, but that activation eventually will really be like she wins another part that really gives her huge, though her acting in Love and War can really be amplified. I don't know if that movie will be shown in 2025 late, or if that will come out in 2026. I don't know when that will land, but I really think that will be like a real changing role for her. And that's all because the Mars is sitting at 0 degrees. And so Saturn and Neptune are going back and forth over her Mars. And that Mars is also the ruler of her 10th house of her career as an actor. So it will also activate the obsession part of the fandom that she experiences. So that, get ready for that. That will be there until it's not. I think it's just it's a constant with the Scorpio at the top of her chart, right? So when people have an opinion and if it's different than someone else, there's always an activation around that, but it's something to keep in mind. But the Mars getting activated by Saturn and Neptune is really dynamic, but North Node also by transit activating it. So it's like 1, 2, 3 plus the solar eclipse in her 3rd house of communication. I think with the solar eclipse, there might be something with one of her siblings that she is may or may not speak to, depending on what it is, because a solar eclipse might be something that the person is dealing with related to something in the head, possibly. Yeah, that could be the case, but hopefully not. But sometimes we see that manifest in life like that. And when the node leaves the Aries, then it's activating water, and then it activates, from a trine, the water in her chart. So it does activate her career a lot more. Then the North Node in the Pisces will activate a different way that her career is experienced and then her confidence. So I kind of wonder about what events are going to transpire for her when the Saturn comes to first the Neptune. So the Neptune can be an event like a leak has happened or something is said. She says something but doesn't exactly want that thing said and wants to pull it back, but too late kind of thing. Neptune is then how it gets all frenzied about it. She gets swept up in something possibly, but then Saturn then is the she'll restrict her voice to some degree, or it might activate her in a new way about how she languages it and turns it back on again and activates it again, because it's going to sweep over it, 1, 2, 3, like it goes in, gets it back, and then back again 3 times, both those planets. So she has a changing dynamic about how she communicates. I kind of wonder other things that she may do with her voice as it pertains to a character and how she gets into that. Tamasha, you asked me about anything romance related. Well, when those sweep in at the Saturn and the Neptune into the Aries, that Mars is trine her Venus, but also remember that's the same point where Luke has his Venus. Okay. But I don't know how much we'll have visibility to it really until 2026. And the reason I say that is because the paradigm shift of those 2 planets finally making a conjunction and then unfolding into the new reality. And that's the new beginning. So whatever is transpiring behind the scenes, really the new beginning really doesn't really show its face really until early 26, right? I hope that makes sense. There can be things said, there can be things that agitate her, these kind of public things, too close for comfort kind of stuff, right? She can get swept up in some themes because of social activism. But if she's getting swept up because her voice is louder because of what's going on that's just terrible to humanity, more power to her. I hope she gets bigger stage, more voice for that, right? So it's all relative, right? Some people will resist that, so she becomes a target. So she has to be careful for that, right? And so she might have to up her security. I mean, I think hopefully she's learned that, but she needs to continue, especially if she continues to be quite a good spokesperson, I think, for humanitarian things. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense relative to Nicola. But yeah, they definitely, Luke and Nicola are both being activated in a huge way. And it definitely ticks off in 26 in an even bigger way. So as we emerge in 26, as we get closer, but if you remember, that Bridgerton season 4 is not going to click out into the public view until like August, as far as we know. But new like media will be presented about that season, but it's not necessarily them, Nicola and Luke being, the forerunner. They're not the front runners, right? They're not the showrunners for season 4. They are side story, right? Everybody wants to see the side story, but I don't think there will be much visible behind the scenes. There might be a few tiny things that they might do on set as like just as personal stories, but I think they have pulled back, and for good reason, right? But they'll be very active because of that Saturn and then that Neptune. So the first thing is Neptune first. So what does that activate? So pay attention. That's going to activate something that comes. There can be some kind of that can be a leak at that time as it pertains to Nicola. And then like like the veil that's been up for us not being able to see behind the veil of what's the real thing here, that could be a moment. But then when Saturn comes, Saturn is then restricting. So what is being visible though? So that's kind of what I gotta go, there's something to that. And then the periods of time that I think are going to be interesting are going to be, I think that eclipse is one. The other one is, so the solar eclipse on March 29th, March 30th, Saturn, or excuse me, Neptune. That's going to be a real telltale moment for, and when I think of solar eclipse, the solar eclipse in Aries is just so active in, because it's in between her own node and her Mars. So like something that she does on purpose it's getting kind of eclipsed, right? But that's one translation of that. And the other is that she's said something, but somebody says something over her or something like that, or she can get swept up because the Neptune's coming in like the next day. Neptune then drops the veil on something. So it's like it's a parts to a story that are unfolding in that couple of days around that. Okay. So there's that. And then when Saturn comes into the Mars, it's like Saturn, some authority figure is speaking and it activates her in a big way. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Her own Saturn is in Capricorn. No, her Saturn is in Sagittarius. So she's going to be active. That's fire to, fire. So she'll be, and it also activates her Venus. So her Venus is also activated. So yeah, relationship and what she's attracted to is maybe more visible. Is it Luke? Maybe. Or is there another thing that we're going to see? Right? She will definitely be more visible just because of all the media shots that have had her with Jake. And Jake's movie is coming out, William Tell or whatever it's called, January 9th or 10th. So it's right around her birthday. It's going to be an interesting kind of beginning of the year, right? So I think it's going to be a fascinating time it's going to send the fandom into a little bit of a frenzy, I think. But I think there'll be a lot more that might become visible towards sometime in March, in that period of time when the eclipse is happening, the Mercury retrograde around that period of time, what's being said, what kind of actions, what kind of perception is happening, these kinds of things. Yeah. I really think that this is the beginning of the veils dropping and having more visibility in for that. And then if we pull up Luke's chart real quick, We can see Luke in the Aries for him is going to be right around his Venus. So that is his career. There will be visibility into other projects because I believe he has wrapped the filming production of White Mars. That will be coming later in 2025, I believe. He has another movie that comes out Christmas time of 2025, maybe a little bit before that. To track it, the box office. I think that's the animation one that he's done the voice. So yeah, Luke Newton's going to be very, very visible, and his stardom it kind of takes off in a big way because the Saturn comes to his Venus. He might feel restricted, but it's actually activating his Venus and activating his ascendant. So it actually activates him forward, right? But there's always a tie to Nicola because of that mirror thing I discussed before, and how intense that will be experienced because of how people perceive her and Luke. There's also the awards ceremonies that are happening in early 2025 and how they get picked up in all of that. So there'll be a lot of activity around them, a lot of media around them in the early part of 2025. So just around the corner, right? Because I think the Golden Globes are the first coming online that I know of. There might be, I don't know when the Oscars, I don't know. I think it's more Golden Globe stuff around Bridgerton, right? So I don't know. Would they be included in the Emmys? Because it's kind of like TV. I don't know if they're included in the Emmys. More Golden Globes, I think. Anyway, I anticipate seeing a lot of their faces and stuff on social media with the awards and Bridgerton season 3 getting recognized in those. Okay, and their participation in that, right? So that will help kick them up a notch. Both of them. It'll be interesting to see how it launches Luke higher than he's right now, because definitely Nicola got a big launch in 2024 and it'll continue in 2025. Because Luke's 10th house of career is the Venus in Aries ruler, and that receiving the Neptune kind of getting him pulled up into more activity. And then the Saturn comes in to give him something, but it's also can be a bit of a challenge to navigate. Saturn is just normal. It's like more work probably. But there's something else. There's something else possibly that is brand new that he will get in from all of this. And that will show up in what he navigates to, through the auditions that he's doing, post White Mars production now. I'm sure he's out there looking at other projects now and what might be announced in the first part of the year, right? So we'll see more of that get highlighted. So, and romantic, again, there's so much speculation with Nicola and Luke, but and then the others on the peripheral with them. My hunch and what I've discussed before is some people perceive that Luke is still with Antonia. That could be the case, but I think there was some kind of breakup or some kind of the detail that happened at the end of August. I've already discussed that. But there could be what I call the back and forth kind of relationship that can happen there if they're close in proximity to each other. I've seen that happen when people are in their that age group. That's possible. But again, until there's more proof of what the real situation is, I kind of wonder if there isn't been some kind of NDA that's been signed and there's still activities of showing a connection when there really isn't. So that's my perception. Okay. Do I care? Not really. I don't really care. I hope they have great careers. I think they're great actors, and that's where I put my focus, right? If they end up together, ooh, that's great. But and then I'll explore the astrology when that's actually visible and real, right? Speculation. Anyway, I think it's going to be an interesting period of time because the nodes, when they're in Pisces and Virgo, are going to move towards being nodal square to Luke's nodes. So he'll have life experiences that present new challenges that for him to, and they're very archetypally important, because when you have lunar nodes square your own lunar nodes, you get presented with experiences that you have to navigate that are important for how you are going to navigate your kind of life story dynamic. You make decision points and things, and that changes where your trajectory here or there, right? So when the nodes are in Pisces, that is the node coming out of the north node coming out of his ninth house of travel and moving into the eighth house, I think things will be happening about his consciousness around hidden subject material, like he might look up more things about psychic awareness or stuff of Pisces, like other realm stuff, or how he psychologically looks at a character, because he always translated as the character he's playing and how he plays off people, right? That actually is the way that Luke Newton gets it. And so that'll be interesting to see. Also, Jupiter moving from Gemini into Cancer expands things in his unconscious mind experience. So he'll become perhaps more aware of his hero, the hero archetype that he plays out, the rescuer, the hero. And the hero who rescues the feminine, and that's maybe something that gets expanded upon. And then he'll also be looking for that nurturing at home and that kind of thing. That'll be big for him. He'll want that solitude. And then the south node in Virgo for Luke Newton will put pressure on his Mercury. And if I'm not mistaken, that then is the pressure of the whole fandom crazy. So he might do things that fans are like, I don't know if I like that, right? So, and he's just doing his art, but people might like it or might not like it, right? So there's going to be that contrast. And that could challenge his self-confidence some, but it's more like the partner again is in the window of view, that it's going to be the partner who's challenged more because of the way his chart is. It's the partner who picks that up. So yeah, so ahead in 2025, in the first half at least, they are going to have an interesting bit of experience with the Saturn and the Neptune in Pisces, or excuse me, from Pisces into Aries, and how that Aries for Luke hits his Venus. And it's really truly going to take off more for that different chapter for him in 2026, because it has to get to 2 degrees 43 minutes to be exact, his Venus. It definitely activates him in a huge way in 2025, but 2026 is really the new chapter, really when it starts to take off more, right? That's where it starts to show up more. Yeah. And Pluto continues deeper into his 7th house, and so his idea and perception of other and relationship continues to go through a huge transformation, which I've always known from looking at his Leo rising and moon in Cancer. Well, that is all I have for you today, and I've been on here since so it's almost 3 o'clock. It's 5 to 3 my time, so I've been on here for 3 hours about. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this little live. I know I had some technical difficulties at the beginning. I know a lot of people watched the live after the fact. I'm going to take a break because I've been on my computer nonstop for the past few days, and I will be back. I'm going to be recording some more videos in the first week of January, and then back into another live on the second half of the 2025. But the production of my videos that are edited probably won't come out until mid-January. So I would like to try to have something produced by Nicola's birthday, but no guarantees. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great first, maybe. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. I might jump in on doing some astrology on that day, but we'll see. Hi, Camilla. So you've given up on both of them way back. I don't know. I still think it's been hidden. There's too much that's been veiled on purpose. I understand. And I don't I don't know. My thing is I had the perception of the world tour just like everybody else, the promo tour, right? But I think I know there's a deep friendship. What's going on now behind the scenes is too much veiled to really be able to read anything. And I think if we can, to me, if I try to read them without really knowing some of their life, I can just say this is when things are going to sneak through, and I can see things getting leaked. Because, I mean, I haven't ran the rectification for either of their charts, which would then maybe make it more like spot on about what's the exact birth time, right? And I now have software that will help me get to that. I had to purchase it for a synastry that I just did. But I think it's valuable to consider that there is a paradigm shift coming, and that is the Neptune and Saturn going into Aries, and that will change everything for Luke and Nicola, both. Nicola first, then Luke. And with that comes what I call the dropping of the veil out of the Pisces. But there will still be some confusion that's stirred up when they both of those planets go back into Pisces. And Neptune will be, not Neptune, but, and the North Node will be in Pisces. So, you know what I mean? So there will be another veil, another veil, another veil. Yeah, but it won't last forever. And there might be other images that sneak out that there's no way they can hide something, right? So those are all potentials in the future. Are they absolutely together? I don't know. Is there a game that's being played? Possible. To keep fans interested and whatnot. I wouldn't put that past Bridgerton. People who do control the website and all of that, right? So I just kind of like, okay, what I'm saying. I mean, if it happens, it happens. If there's something there. But to me, we were all kind of pulled in on some kind of illusion that was created, right? We have to own that, right? But is it real? Because everybody was like, I know what I felt, I know what I saw, but did we? Right? We have to see what happens when the veils drop. And the veils drop when those planets go into Aries and stay there. And that staying in Aries is 2026. Okay? We will have a little bit revealed in 2025 though. And so it will spin people up into like what's real again. So happy New Year to all of you too. Thank you. Is it Camilla? I hope I said it right. Camilla. I think it's just one L, so it's maybe just Camilla. So thank you so much for everybody for attending the live, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Have a great afternoon, everyone, or evening. I think it's evening for most of you. Have a great one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.